All right, team, we are here again for our second ever episode, and we would love it if you could give us some love on this one. It's the Chasing Better podcast with Knoxy. I am our co-host, Dylan, and this week we are here to talk about why food is not the enemy and how actually writing it down proves it. So, Knoxy, why did we go with this one, mate?
A common thing I've been talking about a lot this week, we've had a couple of members that have had sleeve surgeries, we've had bands, all sorts of stuff, bypasses, whatever, when it comes to the food side of things. But we've also had a lot of members that haven't had any sort of stomach adjustments or surgery, so to speak, that still struggle with seeing good versus bad food. And I think this is where a topic is, if you want to start your journey of whether it's weight loss, muscle gain, all of the above, you have to get the basics done right first. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And when we sort of talk about good versus bad food, are you talking about like sugar? Are you talking about, potatoes? What are we talking about, man?
So generally what we see is everyone's like, well, for me to be perfect, because again, everyone's chasing that Hollywood bod, bikini bod, whatever. We generally find that people are like, well, cool, anything associated with sugar is bad. And it's like, well, okay, I can see where you're getting that conclusion from. We're getting smashed with studies saying, white processed sugar is like as addictive as cocaine, like all these sorts of things. And all of a sudden, because it's getting likened to an illicit drug such as cocaine that, Scarface was famous for, all of a sudden go, well, shit. Okay, I'll just never touch bread again. I'll never touch fruit again. I'll never and it all of a sudden becomes this really negative impact on our idea of food or our thoughts around food.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I guess the crazy thing with that is, man, is like people get that so wrong because in a sense, there's no such thing as a good or evil food. Like food's not evil. Food didn't do anything.
I know.
What did food do to you?
Food's a nice guy, man.
I love food, man. We all love food, and it's pretty crazy, isn't it, man? How it's sort of, I guess we've just been bombarded, as you said, man, with all these messages where it's like, you can't eat this, you can't eat that. That'll make you really, really fat, and it's pretty crazy. And so, how do you sort of go about this, man?
I think the big thing to come to terms with is actually getting clients to realize that we just need to squash that altogether. So it's like, cool, we're just going to talk about food as food, right? Whether it's carb-based or protein-based or a bit of everything or whatever, we just need to start talking about food and actually talking. So when we use our language around food, this is exactly another powerful conversation that I could go into for ages. But when we talk about food, we just need to say, cool, today, coach, we're going to talk about food, not the shit food I had or the really good food I had. It's just, I just need to talk to you about my food. Right. And I think that's definitely step number one is just getting rid of the label altogether and just cut it out.
And I really love that, man, because like, as we've sort of gone over, like food is food, but there's that conversation around food, because we have these internal dialogues and we're sort of always rolling into what's good, what's bad. But if you just sit down and have an honest conversation, it often leads to a better place. So I like that, man. It's really good.
Yeah. And I find when you can be brutally honest with a client and just say, well, that's how I look at food now. Like in my weight loss journey, for example, I always saw it as good versus bad food, right? My initial probably 6 months was like everything had to be lean. So if there was a meat on my plate, it was lean. It was chicken sausages, lean. It was chicken breast, lean. It was, there was no fat cuts on anything. If I had steak, I would actually like chisel all of the trimmings off because I was just so afraid of fat, right? And then when it came to carbohydrates, cool, no bread, no sugar, none of it. And
it sounds like a horrible existence.
Yeah, right. And it's even just bringing it up, you can see that my voice elevates, like the stress indicators are there. And I haven't eaten that way for years yet, right? Yeah. And you talk about that with a brand new client now, and they're like, oh my God. And you can see the stress starts to rise up. And like, they're in a completely calm state when they first start talking about food, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And like, I guess that is a big journey, I guess, for someone who has a bit of weight on, or even with not even a lot of weight, and seeing food as the enemy. What was sort of the way you started to work through that, man?
The big thing was actually going and talking to someone about my food finally. And I think this was probably something I found that, I was just seeing a PT at the time, had been doing some training sessions and things. And I can't remember exactly how it happened, but just one day in the gym, I started talking about protein powders. And I was just like, like, do I need it? I'm massive. I'm trying to lose weight. Like, is it going to keep me fat? Is it like, what's the go with protein powders? Because again, I just didn't understand what they were.
Why doesn't protein make you massive, man? Like, why is that sort of misconception? Like, I still don't look like Arnold. I'm pretty gutted, to be honest. But
yeah. And I think that, again, there's all these things where, like, I think marketing has done such a great job of putting certain foods on a pedestal, and it's like, cool, you want world-class results, you need to have as much of this protein powder as possible. Or if you want to be trim, never touch fruit again, because we've just found out that fruit has sugar in it. And it's like, oh god, I hear it now, and I'm just like, it's such a foreign argument, but it's there, like, it's been there for quite some time. Yeah.
And it's almost one of those things too, like with the argument of carbohydrates and that, and you almost look at the leanest people in the world, their diet's predominantly carbohydrate based, like the Asian cultures and that, where they have a lot of rice, they have quite a lot of fruit. So clearly there's something going wrong here in regards to it. And I guess that's what our chat is about today.
Yeah.
Food is not the enemy, but writing it down can really help get some clarity around food.
Exactly. And this is where I start to then branch into the topic of, okay, hey Jenny, when was the first time, or when was the last time you ever actually wrote down what you eat in a daily basis? And guarantee you 9 out of 10 times, as you would know as well, being a gym owner, it's like, oh, I couldn't even tell you what I had for breakfast today, let alone like what I ate yesterday, right? So again, what this indicates to us as a coach is we go, well, okay, cool. So you're living on autopilot, right? You're winging it, so to speak. And it's like, cool. If you want to get results like Arnie, do you think he winged it? No. Of course he didn't, right? There was structure, routine. He had 15 coaches, whatever the case may be. But there was a plan in place, right?
And yeah, with like weight loss and even weight gain, sometimes like it can be such an emotional roller coaster. And I know you've seen with a lot of clients and probably your own journey, man, if you sort of don't know what to change, it's an emotional roller coaster. And so, if you write it down, that helps take away from that emotional roller coaster, doesn't it?
Yeah, and this is the second part of why writing it down is important. And the reason I say writing it down and not typing it into your phone, this is a really key point. A lot of people are like, oh, cool, yeah, I'll write a note in my phone. No, I want you to, even if you have to go down to Officeworks or wherever you need to go, I need you to go and buy a new pen and a piece of paper or a notebook or a pad or a writing utensil of something. Write it on your arm if you have to. I want you to physically take time out of your day to write it down manually, not automatically onto a phone. Now, the reason for this is that generally, and I've seen this happen, like word for word, people have gone, oh, I tracked really good for day one on my phone, but then I think I got distracted yesterday because I had like this phone call come through as I was writing down my food for the day. And now I haven't actually written down for 3 days, right? And now all of a sudden, like there's distractions again. And it's like, cool, okay. It's not that you've done a bad thing. It's just you got distracted. So it's like, how do we get rid of that distraction? Again, we keep it super simple and we remove the distraction as best we can. Write it on paper.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really good. And like, I guess when you write it down on paper, what sort of has that helped clarify for your clients?
I think the clarity is that it gets it out of your head, right? Because where does all the stress happen in our body? In the friggin' head. Like your mind is constantly fighting against itself. Actually, did I follow the rules that coach gave me? Hang on, did I write the grams right? Like when you can just put it down on paper, you get it out of your head, right? It's the same as when you're journaling your thoughts, right? It's a form of meditation. It clears the head, yada, yada, yada. The same rule applies if you're tracking your food. I've seen that it is more efficient to just get it out of your brain. It's down on paper and it's out of the way.
Can I ask Knoxy, like, if you don't track it, does it count?
Yes. No, it doesn't. So no, of course it doesn't. So yeah, I mean, this is another common thing as well. It's like, oh, I missed one day. And it's like, okay, yeah, cool. How many times are you going to miss one day in a month? 7, 8, 9, 12, 25, 31, right? How many times have we heard, oh, I only missed the gym, but it's like the first, the first of 300 days, like, all this sort of stuff. Like, it has to be something like anything. If you're trying to learn a new skill, just have a crack at it every day. Just get used to doing it every day. And that's why it's like, there's no point me putting you on a calorie deficit or telling you your macro cycles or all this sort of stuff if you can't even commit to just writing your food down every day. Like, that's
absolutely, man.
You're already 2 steps behind before you get started with calories.
Yeah. And I guess, man, in terms of like, a lot of people will feel a bit of shame and feel like a bit of a failure. Like, let's say, for example, like, you do have a chocolate bar, or, you have a Mars bar and something, and it's like, oh, I shouldn't put it in there because coach is going to see it.
Yeah.
And, like, what does that lead to, man? Because we all know where that leads, but, why is that not such a great idea? And how can you open up and be honest with your coach, and why is that helpful?
I think the first thing is, again, what that points out to me is that they're not being honest with themselves. It's not the fact that they're going to be unimpressed towards their coach. They're, all this sort of stuff. Like, coach is going to bite my head off, whatever. If your coach is going to bite your head off as a 50-kilo overweight person that's never been in a gym before and never tracked their food, then get a new coach. Like, that's just plain and simple. And they haven't done enough to start with to get you on the right starting points. Like, that's how I see it. I know it's blunt, take it how you want. But again, if you haven't asked those right questions to start with and found the right starting point, like we said in last week's podcast, found your 100 meters, like, how do you know you're going to get to your second, 100 meters, to your first 5Ks, all that sort of stuff. So again, like, what I would suggest is, it's like, instead of like, because essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to impress your coach. You're not just trying to follow the basics and just stick to what your coach is guiding you to do. Right? Because your journey shouldn't be so that your coach feels $1 million. Your journey should be so that you feel $1 million. Right? That's probably the shining example of like why that thought pattern doesn't work.
I love that, man. That's such a great thing, eh? Like, and often too, like, when you do sort of hide away, as you said, if you don't write it down, it just keeps building up in your head, and then you sort of feel scared to reach out to your coach, and then all of a sudden it's hard to get help. Mm-hmm. And in regards to all of this, man, like, is there a few tools you've used to, maybe make the tracking easier or writing it down easier?
Well, obviously the most basic form, if you're someone that's not tech savvy, don't start with apps. Like, just plain and simple, like, keep it freaking simple. Paper and pen, and just get used to the daily ritual of just writing it down. I've even told some members that are just so easily sidetracked. Again, I'm one of them. I get distracted at the drop of a hat. But I've even told them, like, as you'll eat, like, for that first week, right, just to get used to it, as you eat that banana, write it down on paper. As you have your chicken wrap for lunch, write it down on paper. What was in it? That's it. It's done. It's out of the way. You've completed that task. I think if you're going to use apps and stuff like that, definitely get guidance towards ones that have been proven to work, because there are thousands, if not millions, out there on the App Store, as with any app these days. A couple of that I've personally used that have worked really well is Chronometer. This is one where you can literally track recipes. You can track and add your own recipes and foods and things like that. It's got barcode scanners, everything. It is just, once you've done a week of tracking on that, you can track any day of your life. Like, it's so user-friendly once you learn the first couple of days. MyFitnessPal, another great version. I know it can be a bit blocky in terms of some of the features that are actually the most efficient or effective features are blocked if you don't pay for it. But even you can still get by with just the free version. And, I've got guides on that I've given out to people. So yeah, if you do need those, make sure you hit us up, guys. I can send that out to you. But again, it's it's keeping it super simple and just having something that you can do daily. So that's where apps come in really handy, but you have to make sure that you are set up to use the app. Because again, as with all apps, you can turn them off or delete them if you don't use them. Like that's the thing. So you've got to be careful when it comes to apps and technology, because again, it's easy to get distracted. That's why if to keep it simple, even if it's just for that first week, I always recommend pen and paper.
Absolutely, man. And I guess just to sort of wrap it up, man, and in regards to how can you make this process as easy as possible and make it something to stick to? But I guess more importantly, why would you stick to it?
As with anything in the health and fitness game, go and find someone who's already done it. I think that's probably the biggest advice I can give on anything. And you'll probably hear me say this on literally every episode. But it's true with anything, right? Like, and again, if you can see food tracking or understanding calories or whatever part of nutrition is you're trying to learn, see it as a skill, because it is. Tracking food is a skill, right? You're learning how to write something down every day, just like clockwork, just like going to the toilet every day, just like having brunch every day. Like you learn that as a skill, but to do that, there has to be a series of steps. And generally, you've usually asked someone who's done it before. Right. Even if you're someone that's like, oh, hey, Jenny, you were doing food tracking with your coach like 6 months ago. What did that look like? Right. You're still asking someone who's been there potentially, like how to do it. And I think that's probably like the best way to foolproof your plan is like go and see someone who's done it before. Reach out to a coach who's, offering advice, start looking up information on pages that give out just basic general tips. Don't try and dive into the science day one. Again, that's never going to help you, especially if you're a flat out beginner. Like try and just look for the basics and look for someone who's done it before.
Yeah, that's a massive one, eh? We often make this stuff so confusing. And literally, as you said, man, what I really, really loved is like, look, just write your food down. Start with the super basics, put it on a pen and paper, write it down as you're eating it, make it super, super easy. Get help from someone who has done this before so that when you do go off track, because it's inevitable at some point, like I go off track, you go off track, we'll probably go off track again. But what we do is we reach out, I guess, and to have those people around that can help us, guide us is a pretty incredible thing. And just, I guess, man, like, why is it important to, where does that journey of, I guess, understanding your food take you?
I always lead with this at the start. This is something I drop on all of my clients, whether they're online, in person, whatever. Trained, tracked food before, haven't. It doesn't matter who they are. The message is always the same. Like, I want to get every client or friend or person that's reached out for help, whoever they may be, I want to get them to a point where they can just have an open conversation without feeling scared or nervous to talk about food or calories or whatever stage of nutrition they're at with me. Like, I want them to just be able to come to me and go, hey, coach, food was shit this week. I know because blah, blah, blah. 1, 2, 3. Yep, sweet. Okay, cool. What did we learn from it? How do we move on? How do we get better? All right. Instead of, I did really well. Well, because straight away, body language, tone of voice, it just tells me you're either hiding something or you just feel uncomfortable with the process. Right. And if you feel uncomfortable with the process and it's only week 2, you're not going to stick to it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is like the reason why you want to just keep this super simple and reach out to someone who's done it is like eventually like food should no longer be evil. Food should no longer be good versus bad. Food is fuel and it gets you through your day and it gets the work done.
Yeah, that's massive, man. And like, it's funny, isn't it? Like, as we said at the start of this, food didn't do anything bad to us. It's just a lack of understanding, and it's like, and I think the great thing now, especially with great coaches like yourself, man, like being able to have that honest conversation, use the tools we have at our disposal, just removes that, really emotional journey, what, losing weight or gaining weight is, and it's, I think in terms of that, man, it's a great tool. So I guess, Knoxy, bro. So you said you got a bit of a free resource for people who listen to the podcast. How do they grab that one, man?
Yeah, guys. So if you just want to touch base on social, so drop us a DM, comment, whatever on any of my content. I usually post it up probably once a month, but it's just a super simple guide on how to use tracking apps like MyFitnessPal for the first time when it comes to tracking food and things like that. If you are looking at going down the route of using apps for your tracking, again, if you're wanting tips and tricks on how to write it down just on pen and paper, by all means, drop me a message on socials as well. But if you do watch the content, I am quite often talking about simple things for food tracking and kind of dive into a bit more specific. So yeah, always worth a look. And again, if you're stuck, just ask. We're here to help.
Awesome, man. I love it. And yeah, cheers for another awesome episode, bro. And we will catch you next week.
No dramas, man. Talk soon.